Hello and welcome. I'm Melissa. Thank you for joining me for episode 4 of Coalition Conversations. Today we're going to be discussing the new hires in the USTR, as just recently the Office of the United States Representative announced 13 key staff appointments for the Biden-Harris administration. Joining me to further discuss these new appointments and key leaders, I'm pleased to have Michael Stumo, CEO of the CPA, alongside our Government Relations Director, John Toomey. Gentlemen, welcome. For those who are watching live, feel free to go ahead and leave your comments and questions in the comment section below, and we'll try to address them. And Michael and John, I'd love to discuss every single new hire that was just appointed, but I don't know if we'll have enough time. So out of the 13 key staff appointments, which ones do you feel are important for CPA members to keep an eye on, and what can we expect from them in your opinion?
Thanks, Melissa. I think we're seeing more continuity than we had perhaps expected from the Trump trade policy, as far as taking more hawkish views of neoliberal trade agreements. Number one, of course, is Katherine Tai. She was the former chief trade counsel at the House Ways and Means and the Democratic side, the majority. She worked for Chairman Richard Neal. And we've dealt with her a lot at CPA, and she does have, she has worked at the USTR before under Obama, before going to work at Ways and Means. But I think the most positive thing that I can say is that in our experience, she understands that domestic industrial strategy is really the most important thing for our country, and that trade agreements or international trade obligations need to either conform to what we want to do or be changed. But her parents were born in China, but ended up going to Taiwan. And I believe she was born in Taiwan, and of course is an American lawyer. So she also worked on the USMCA, the NAFTA 2.0, in getting provisions in to attempt to reshore some auto industry jobs, et cetera. So she's on track to be, and John, maybe you could tell us, she's on track to be go through nomination hearing and confirmation process. What's the status of that?
Yeah, that's right, Michael. Catherine's confirmation hearing is set for next week, next Thursday, the 25th of February, and she'll begin the nomination process then. I will say she brings a wealth of knowledge, not only formerly at USTR, as you mentioned, Michael, but she also, coming from Ways and Means, she understands the Hill dynamic very well. And, she's very well suited to understand the balance between the congressional side and the executive side as well. So she'll bring a great understanding of how those two operate and work together. So really looking forward to her at the helm of USTR.
And I'd say that exchange rate policy is, of course, a big piece of what CPA is concerned about. And we've been interacting with her staff quite a bit on exchange rates over the years. They didn't actually have jurisdiction over the issue, so they couldn't act, but they're well aware of it. And John, the process is she'll have to have that hearing first at the Finance Committee level. Then they'll have to have another Finance Committee meeting for a vote. And assuming she gets a favorable vote, then she would have to get a vote in the full Senate, right?
That's correct. And so far, we've heard positive feedback from folks on both sides of the aisle, praise for her nomination on the Republican side as well. So expecting hopefully smooth sailing for Katherine here in her nomination process.
Right. So the next one, the big three at USTR are of course, the trade ambassador, then the chief of staff, then the general counsel. They're the ones that really see all the issues and make policy and strategy. The deputy U.S. trade representatives, they have particular topical areas. We haven't seen many of them appointed or nominated yet, but those are the big three. So the second is the chief of staff. That's Nora Todd. She's a great choice as well, as Nora has been, I knew her when she was at Congressman Michau's office, Michaud of Maine, Michaud. And Michaud was a significant trade agreement skeptic. And then she went to work for and he was a leader in that case, a leader against these trade agreements. She's been on the Hill for quite some time. She's recently worked for Sherrod Brown as a senior economic policy advisor, and Sherrod Brown has been very pro-working class, anti-trade agreement, and also worked very hard to stem currency manipulation in his career. And Sherrod Brown has been pretty influential for hires in the Biden administration, for better or for worse, depending on what you like. But word is that he was a significant reason Janet Yellen got her position rather than others. But Nora Todd, being chief of staff at USTR, it's a powerful post. She's a gatekeeper, but she's got the right background for this from our perspective, and a focus on jobs. And John, what are you thinking? Anything you could add?
No, I just think she's a native of Atlanta. She got her undergraduate from Stanford, her master's from Georgetown. She knows Washington well. Coming from Senator Brown's office, she'll bring a wealth of knowledge, and certainly someone who will be a true champion for domestic manufacturing as well. Given her past posts and understanding it, she'll be a close confidant for the ambassador as well. And so, yeah, I think it shows tremendous leadership from the top down, and a great choice by bringing Nora Todd into the fold here as chief of staff.
And the next one of the big three, as I mentioned, is the general counsel. It's Greta Peisch, I think her name is, Peisch. Apologies to Greta if I'm saying her last name wrong, but Peisch, I'm sure it's probably not the first time. But she came directly from Wyden's office. He's the chairman now. He was ranking member last year, and now chairman right now of the Senate Finance Committee, which is the committee with jurisdiction over trade. And so she was there as their senior international trade counsel. Before that, she was at USTR's general counsel's office. So she went from USTR to Wyden, and now back to USTR, but now as the general counsel. She's a lawyer by training, graduated from Yale, served as a clerk for a judge. And I don't really know a lot about her. Ron Wyden has been, he's a knowledgeable fellow. He's been a little bit more neoliberal free trade proponent than CPA is. I don't know if Greta shares those views or not. But John, do you have any further insight?
No, I just think, again, this shows, but a staffing up of folks within the USTR with strong Washington knowledge and inner workings of both the executive and the legislative side. And I think she'll serve the USTR well in her role. So looking forward to her in that position, working hand in glove with Nora, obviously, and of course, Ambassador Tai.
So for Biden has to execute on Build Back Better. And we know that a lot of the trade agreements have been an impediment to that. And so the USTR will have to be doing tasks such as considering whether we need to pull out of parts of government procurement agreement at the WTO, certain rules that require us to treat other countries' goods the same as our own for stimulus purposes. That was a huge issue under Obama when that stimulus under his administration, a lot of it went to overseas companies. A lot of Democrats want to avoid that this year. I think what we've seen, in the Biden administration, people are split on these issues, and the story is still being written. But another interesting hire, there's two others I'd like to cover. One is a guy by the name of Brad Setzer. And he used to be at Treasury. He's an economist. And typically, I'm not terribly excited about Treasury people getting into trade. But because exchange rates are such a huge issue, and you can't build back better. I mean, the strong dollar foiled Trump in trying to get a narrowed trade deficit. And the strong dollar will foil President Biden if they don't address it, because the misaligned dollar or excessively strong dollar makes everything we sell to the world too expensive, all our goods, services, and labor, and makes imports a lot cheaper, so we suck in a lot more imports. So you can't fix trade unless you fix exchange rates. Brad Setzer's been writing about exchange rates, capital flows, and the relationship with trade for some time. And so he's truly an expert on that connection, which is crucial. And so it's very interesting that he went to, I expected him to have a Treasury appointment and to deal with currency issues there, but he's at USTR. So I'm personally optimistic. I'm a bit excited about it. Brad, he has not been as aggressive on remedies as CPA has been. We want to regulate capital flows in the national interest so they don't, the capital flows don't push the dollar too high. He hasn't been wanting to go quite that far when I talked to him a couple of years ago. But in any event, it's breaking new ground for Brad Setzer to go over there. John, anything more to add?
No, I think that's right, Michael, and I think it shows a real commitment from the Biden team to build back better here, to put someone in at USTR that has a strong understanding of currency. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the first time that we've seen such a move in this direction with a senior post at the USTR?
Well, yeah, they've never. It's always Treasury has always done currency, and USTR has always done micro trade policy, tariffs and non-tariff barriers.
Yeah, so that's certainly a new and interesting development, one that we'll certainly be following closely. So yeah, I'm excited about Brad's post there, and I think certainly, again, shows that commitment to building back better, looking at all different aspects of trade.
We're hoping to get some of these folks into our annual trade conference too, which is going to be February 23rd to 26th. And I just sent Brad Setzer an invite today, and have sent an invite to Nora Todd yesterday, and she's trying to find space. If Catherine Tai is confirmed by then, she may be present too, but at least Nora is intending to come, it looks like right now. The last
invitation's live on the air. So
exactly. Come and don't hide from us. We're the ones in flyover country that are going to be affected. And the next one is Mark Wu, who's another. He's not quite as groundbreaking as Brad Setzer because he's a WTO expert. He's a professor from Harvard University, which is usually something I would not be terribly excited about, someone from Harvard coming into the USTR and trade. But he's an exception because he's actually known, he's colleagues or collegial with one of our board members, Mark Fastow, who's our co-vice chairman right now. And Mark has dialogued with Mark Fastow and Mark Wu for some time about globalization. And from Mark Fastow's perspective, Mark Wu is a lot closer to our position than, the neoliberal free traders, number one. But more importantly, he wrote a big paper last year on the WTO and the role of the WTO for U.S. trade objectives, and was surprisingly skeptical, was quite supportive of what Bob Lighthizer had done. I mean, he didn't go right out and say he was writing for a Democratic audience, but still pretty much supportive of where Bob Lighthizer was going on the WTO as far as the appellate body. And because some of the listeners may know that Lighthizer objected to the reappointment of certain appellate body members at the WTO, those that hear appeals of the decisions, because they go too far outside the scope of the WTO agreement that Congress signed in 1995. They're making new law. It wasn't what we signed. And others have, some of Obama's USTR team was critical of it too, but didn't act. Lighthizer did act. And so that's a big issue. And for the U.S.-China context, Wu basically says, and does say, not basically, but fully says, that don't look to the WTO to solve the China issues, or to Europe. Europe has their own objectives with China. They may come around, and maybe sometimes we can work together, but Europeans have their own objectives. And obviously we've seen this with the Germans and Angela Merkel, who has just pushed through a new investment treaty with China, as Biden was getting in. And the WTO's mechanisms just are not really, they're too slow. They're not really set up for the China fight. And we're going to have to look outside the WTO to deal with U.S.-China relations in the near term. So those are all true statements. We at CPA were worried that the clash between the want to have a domestic industrial strategy and to have a strong multilateral work with your allies strategy was impossible. It's because our allies' interests are not the same as our interests, and they've exhibited that. So we'll see how that plays out, but certainly Mark Wu has recognized and written about it and has put the thumb on the scale toward domestic interests. But John, do you have anything to add?
No, it's just, adding on to that, Michael, do you think Mark will be an important person for us as relates to the government procurement agreement with the WTO? Is that someone that we'll look to as, in your opinion, with his background and pedigree, as someone who will be looking at that issue with a more?
I think you'll have some input on the side. I think USTR will be asked about this. Right now, from our understanding, the government procurement agreement issues are coming out of the White House more. But when they decide on things, and even before, they'll pull in the trade team, and it's actually the U.S. trade representative that would have to execute any action on it. That's what we saw under Trump for pharma last year, when everyone is hoarding their own, medicines and pharmaceutical, their PPE and everything, 72 countries, in fact. And we realized we needed to build up our own. Despite the big pharma fighting the other way, Trump put out an executive order directing the government to take action to make more of our own of all these healthcare categories, and including looking at pulling out of at least part of the WTO GPA, Government Procurement Agreement. And in November, Lighthizer did execute on that and sent the notice that we're pulling out with regard to pandemic response goods. It's a long process of, they have their Europeans and others, a bunch of countries have objected. There's a what do they call it? A time where they talk, a consultation period, and then they can, do some other things. It's a long, slow process, like anything in Geneva, because we've outsourced our trade policy to Geneva. So there are options for Biden to go a lot quicker than that. It's been outlined to him and his team how to do it. We'll be talking to some White House people next week. But I think Mark Wu is going to at least be involved when USTR is brought in.
It's a lot, guys. You guys have a lot of work ahead of yourselves in the next couple of weeks, meeting with policy leaders in DC. And Michael, like you said, we do have our trade conference. It's going to be March 23rd to 26th that we're hoping to meet some of these policy individuals virtually.
We're going to intervene. There's a lot of, we're going to have people like Senator Marco Rubio, Congressman Bill Posey. We're going to have some USTR people. This is, you're not going to want to, every day is going to have new issues, and you're going to hear from people who are making things happen. So it's important to attend.
Yeah, so you can go ahead, if you're watching now, if you're a CPA member, it is a benefit of becoming a member of ours to attend this conference at no extra cost. If you are a general public and you'd like to become a CPA member, we strongly invite you to do so. If not, there is a small minimal fee to attend this conference for general public. You can find more information on our website at prosperousamerica.org. And I'd like to thank you both again for taking the time out to discuss the new hires in the USTR, as well as our sponsor of the week, Liberty Tabletop, the only U.S. flatware manufacturer. You can visit their site at libertytabletop.com, where you can enjoy their pattern of the month pearl at 15% off. Thank you all for tuning in to Coalition Conversations. The easiest way to support CPA is to share our content. So please share and like this video. You can also sign up for CPA's email newsletters on our site to stay up to date on what's happening in trade. And again, don't forget about the virtual conference happening March 23rd to 26th. You can register firsthand, getting all the information from policy and industry leaders in sectors from currency, healthcare, tech, and more. Enjoy your weekend and see you next Friday.